Well, guys, here we are. 1, 2, and 3. This is actually the first time I've held all 3 Luigi's Mansion games in my hand for a video, and it's really, really cool, actually, just looking at all 3 of these side to side. And what's really, really weird, is how vastly different these games are. So today's video, I'm going to be comparing Luigi's Mansion 3 to Luigi's Mansions 1 and 2, but here's where it's going to be different than the last video I did. So the main difference between this video and the last comparison video I did between Luigi's Mansions 1 and 2, the main difference is that this time I'm going to be focusing more on the negatives. Now, here's why. It's kind of obvious where this game improved, right? Like, I could say, oh, this game has Portugal, so it's definitely better than the second in that regard, so we all know where it vastly improved from the second game, or what it improved from the first game. We kind of already know that stuff. But I really want to go deep into what I think this game could have improved and how this game could have been better compared to the past 2 games, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. Yeah, let's get into the video.
ZakPak, he's always there for you. ZakPak, only on YouTube. ZakPak, what will he do next? ZakPak, let's find out, 'cause it's on with the show.
So, the first topic I want to talk about is the music. I think this game relatively falls short in the music department. Simply because I don't think there are many memorable tunes. Memorable tunes that I can really repeat in my head. Like, you know, like I can't really hum anything in my head besides maybe the main theme, but that's only because it's kind of a prevalent theme. And in my opinion, I wasn't a huge fan of the main theme. It's not that I didn't like it. It's not that I was like, oh, this is a horrible piece of music. It just didn't stick to me. I wasn't like, you know, I didn't love it. And that's where both of these 2 games, in my opinion, thrived. I think both games had decent music. I think the second game overall had a better soundtrack than the first. And that's just because there was more variety in the soundtrack. There's just more going on rather than the first game's relatively simplistic soundtrack. But, in my opinion, what these 2 do better is I think it sets a memorable tone for the series. Like, you hear a bit of music, let's say, in Super Smash Brothers, or just like you do like a music game in general, and you can automatically say, oh, that's definitely a Luigi's Mansion song. That song's definitely from Luigi's Mansion. In 3, I think it went for a different approach. It went for an approach that was like, okay, so we're going to have each floor have its own independent theme, and they're all going to be different. And in my opinion, it kind of didn't work, in my opinion. I think granted, each floor should not have been the same repetitive theme, but I think they should have gone for kind of what the second game did, where you have an overall theme. Like, you take the main theme, and you adjust that theme to fit the floor, rather than making different soundtrack pieces for each floor. Especially when some floors had different music for different rooms. So, I think it made the music, in my personal opinion, less memorable when you were hearing different songs in each and every single room you went into. And especially, like, the songs that I did like, you know, I listened to it on a single floor, or even a single room, and then I never hear them again. So, I think Luigi's Mansion 3, I think this is one of the most controversial opinions out there in terms of Luigi's Mansion 3. I personally found the soundtrack completely forgettable. There were a couple good ones, like I think I liked Twisted Sweet's music, I liked some of the dance hall music, but that only accounted for, like, 10-15 minutes, or Twisted Sweet's a little bit more, but Dance Floor's music, since there were so many themes on that floor, it only accounted for 10 minutes of my gameplay out of the 12 hours I played the game, so, you know, a couple good soundtrack pieces that take up a fraction of the game doesn't make a great soundtrack. So, in my personal opinion, I think Luigi's Mansion 3 suffers in the soundtrack department. Alright, so I'm gonna put the second game aside here, because I can't, that one doesn't really count in this one. Let's talk, Portrait, or Boss Ghosts, however you want to refer it. This is where it's really, really interesting, because I love them in both games. I think they work in both games, but I do like the first game's Portrait Ghosts more. Here's why. Everyone's gonna say, oh, he's just biased. No. I think that in 3, they had personality, and that wasn't a real concern that I had. It's just that they didn't feel deep. the one thing with this game, with the first game, is that most of the Portrait Ghosts felt deep. There was backstory, and that was mostly helped by the dialogue that the ghosts talk to you with, and the backstories that you saw on the Game Boy Horror. There's actual substance there with each and every ghost. Luigi Mansion 3, you don't really get that. You get the build-up, and you see the ghosts get angry and go, I'm angry, but they don't say anything to you. They don't have any exposition. They don't have any background. They don't have any character. They're just ghosts that kind of mimic the environment that they're in. Like, for example, King McFright. He's a king ghost, so he gets all mad, and he hops on his horse, and he jousts you, but he doesn't say anything. He's not like, oh, my wife didn't die so that I would be overthrown by a plumber. He doesn't say anything like that. You know, stuff like that gives the characters background and character and uniqueness really make it. And there are a couple Portrait Ghosts or boss ghosts that did have that. Morty, for instance. Morty is my favorite boss ghost in the game because he does have that. He has that character, he has that emotion, he has the dialogue that makes him feel more human. In my opinion, none of the other ghosts did that. I know I'm not counting Helen Gravely because she's a main boss. If she didn't have any dialogue, that'd be pathetic because she's a main boss. But I'm talking about the other, I think, 15 boss ghosts. None of them had dialogue. I think Stewart had something in the beginning, but it was very minimal. It was like, oh, are you ready to check in? There is nothing much there. I'm talking about deep dialogue, where you really get to see the emotion of the ghost. You really get to see what the ghost is about, rather than them just throwing a fit of rage and just making faces at you. That's kind of what I mean. Okay, so now the first game is going to take a back seat. Let's talk about Scarescraper. I think Scarescraper is also good in both games. I think Luigi Mansion 3 has a fun Scarescraper mode. But one problem I have with the Scarescraper is it lacks the amount of it lacks the amount of, what's the word? It lacks the amount of options that Dark Moon had. Dark Moon had more floor options. You were allowed to pick which game modes you wanted to play. And, you know, overall, there were more power-ups. There's an upgrade system. So there's more in Dark Moon that made it, that made the Scarescraper fun. While 3 definitely has a fun Scarescraper mode, I really think it's limited by the limited number of common ghosts. Not too much of a problem in this one, but we will talk about common ghosts later. But in my personal opinion, it's very much rinse and repeat. So, actually, no, common ghosts does kind of fall into this, because the bosses are basically the same exact ones. You have basically 3 options of the 4 kinds of main common ghosts, which is okay, but the end boss is always the same. So you always fight bosses at the top of the tower. You don't really get much else. You kind of know what you're getting into. If you're playing 5 floors, you complete 4, and then you fight bosses. If you're doing 10 floors, you do 4 floors, then a rare ghost boss, then the other 4, and then the bosses battle. There isn't really much to spice things up or to mix things up. There's less options, and that's where, in my opinion, I think Scream Park could have just went away. That's the one thing with Nintendo nowadays, and I noticed this with Super Mario Party and Mario Tennis as well, is that they want to have a wider variety of modes, but the modes themselves don't have much substance to them. Look at Super Mario Party, for instance, and even Splatoon, I'd even say. Splatoon started off with barely any multiplayer maps, but they added this new Salmon Run mode. With Luigi Mansion 3, they have the Scarescraper returning, but they stripped away features, but they also brought a different multiplayer mode in. I personally would have preferred eliminating Scream Park altogether, and especially because Scream Park has only 3 games. So, eliminate Scream Park altogether and add more features to the Scarescraper. Now, of course, people have been saying, oh, but Zach, there's DLC that's coming out. Yeah, but for an incomplete experience, in my opinion, the fact that Luigi Mansion 3 Scarescraper has less than Dark Moon's, granted, there's the blackout mode and all that kind of stuff, but those are little tiny cosmetic things. I'm talking about things that will really grip you and bring you back. 3 doesn't really have that, and it makes me wonder, why would I want to spend money on something that should have been complete when we got it? And if it was a matter of timing, I would have just said delay the game. Luigi's Mansion's never been notorious for coming out on Halloween. Sure, it's a Halloween game, but it's never, the only time it's come out in October is with the remake. So, I think Dark Moon definitely did Scarescraper better, even though, obviously, it looks better in 3, and, there's hallways in 3, which is a really interesting addition. Yeah, I just think they could have improved Scarescraper quite a bit. I'm not saying that's not good. It's still a lot of fun, as fun as Dark Moon, but it still lacks a lot of options, a lot of features that Dark Moon's Scarescraper had. Alright, let's talk Common Ghosts. Let's get this one out of the way. Let's see. I'm pretty certain I did a count. Luigi's Mansion 1, I think, had 11 Common Ghosts. I'm going to try and put, the names of all the Common Ghosts on the side so that you guys can stick along with me. I think it had 11. If I'm wrong, then I'll put the actual number, and I'm talking about unique designs. I'm not talking reskins, like Speedy Spirits don't count, the Bowler Ghosts don't count. I'm talking completely unique designs. I believe there's 11. Luigi's Mansion 2 has, I think, 7 or 8 unique designs, which is still not bad, still pretty good. Luigi's Mansion 3 has 5. And, you know I counted the waiter ghosts in the Luigi's Mansion 1's one. But that's why I'm counting the Trapper ghosts here, because I don't count the waiter ghosts as common ghosts, but I also don't count the Trappers as common ghosts, so I'm kind of balancing it out. But 5? You know, and it's one thing, you know, like, I know Dark Moon only has 3 more, and Luigi's Mansion has a lot more, but, like, thing is, Luigi's Mansion 1, I can beat in, like, 2.5 hours, or 2 hours. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, I don't even know, I've only played it, like, twice. But 3 is a decently long game. Like, it took me 12 hours to beat this, and it'd probably take me 6 or 7, maybe, on a second playthrough if I was speedrunning or rushing it. So, this game would take me 3 times as long as this game, but there's half, not even, of the common ghosts. You're finding I'm still considering it 4. You're finding the same 4 common ghosts all the time. And it's not just the same 4 common ghosts. The amount of skew that there is, I caught over 200-something blue ghosts, the goobs, and I caught like 30-something of the other ones. So I've fought like 5 times as many blue ghosts as I have every other ghost. It's insane. And Luigi's Mansion 1, and I even think to some extent Luigi's Mansion 2, they balanced it more. So where you fought each and every kind of common ghost, maybe not the exact same. Like, you probably did fight orange ghosts in this game more than any other kind of ghost. But not by 5 times as much. Like, maybe you caught 10 more of the orange ghosts compared to the rest of them. You know, there's just... the common ghosts just lack the variety that both of these games set. And the fact that the first game in particular, like the third game's ghosts are mostly copy and paste from the second game. You had the sneaky uppy scary ghost, you had the hidey ghost, the regular ghost, the really strong one. So it's mostly copy and paste from this game. But Luigi's Mansion 1... you had one, now granted, this isn't talking about the unique designs, this is talking about functionality. You had one that dropped bombs on you, you had one that threw a bowling ball at you, you had ones that grabbed you, granted, they appeared in 3 as well. But there are just so many more unique types of ghosts. There were ghosts that were weak to certain elements. There are just so many different kinds of ghosts that made combat feel fresh. And I think 3 really threw that away, especially with the addition of the slam, that really make things repetitive. It makes the combat not as enjoyable. Not saying that the combat in 3 is bad. It's quite good, in fact. Especially since I don't use the slam that much. I use it quite a bit in Scare Scraper, but that's because of time. You know, you want to get things done fast. But in the main game mode, I don't use the slam. So, for me, slam's not that much of an issue. But what is an issue is the lack of real variety in the common ghosts. And, you know, yes, the blue ghost can hold shields, and can hold, but after a burst or just suction shot the shield off, it's the same ghost at the end of the day. There's nothing unique about each fight, and especially when it becomes later in the game and you've noticed, like, and the ghosts there's nothing new about them just holding items. They're still just holding items. There's nothing new there. So, yeah, combat and ghost variety is non-existent, and I mean common ghost variety. Alright, so this one's gonna be kind of harder to explain, so bear with me as I'm trying to explain it. Atmosphere. Now, I know, lots of people hate when I talk about the brightness, and everyone's like, oh, but Zach, there's a brightness slider. The brightness slider is like one of the best additions to the game, so don't think I'm bashing on the brightness slider. There is a problem with the brightness slider, though. And this is something I mentioned a long time ago that was a fear, and it did come true. So, this game, the game's lighting, I should say, is inconsistent. So, some rooms are naturally darker, and some rooms are naturally lighter. So if you slide the brightness slider all the way down, those dark rooms will be dark, and it'll be lovely, and it'll be great, and it'll be dark. But there will be rooms that are still bright. You still have bright rooms with the brightness slider down. I don't get it. You know, I know the fact that people are so annoyed with me talking about brightness, whatever, I get it. And everyone's like, oh look, Zach, the brightness slider addresses all your problems. So you guys tell me it addresses all my problems, I'm going to address that and say it doesn't. The game is still bright in lots of areas. Let me take the mezzanine, for example. The fight with Chef Souffle, oh my lord, that boss battle is way too bright. Like, oh my god, too much light. And it's in my Zach plays. You see that, like, you know, there are rooms that are so dark and the flashlight really makes an impact and it's beautiful. Those are the best looking segments of the game to me. But then you take those moments and it's like, what the heck? Here's the thing. If you want the game bright, good for you. I don't care. I don't want it bright. So, that's why consistency in the lighting helps. Because if you want it bright, you can turn the brightness slider up and it's bright for you. If you want it dark, you can turn it down and the whole game is dark for you. End of story. And people are like, oh, but once you clear a room... Well, here's the thing with this game. It's different than the first. You don't clear floors. Floors are never cleared. You can go back to a previous floor and there are always ghosts there. So, have the mansion be consistently dark. Don't have lit up rooms. Have the whole mansion be dark. And if you want it light, have a lighting option where you can make it brighter. And then there you go. But as someone who likes the atmosphere of Luigi's Mansion 1 and was like anxious for this to return with this brightness ladder, like, yes, it's gonna happen. The beginning of the game looked great because the beginning of the game was so dark and so nice. But then once I got to the mezzanine and some of the future floors, I'm like, wow, it's bright again. Like, why is it inconsistent? It shouldn't be inconsistent. I even think there was a time in my Zak plays where I was like, did my brightness slider go up or something? Because I went into the options and I'm like, oh no, it's all the way down. So I'm like, if you're going to do lighting, make it consistent so that it looks good and that those people who want it to be dark or want it to be bright can do such without one of them feeling screwed. That's all I got to say on that. Alright, let's talk about structure. Structure is going to be an interesting one. Let's get this one out of the way. It's way better than Dark Moon, I can tell you that. Structure, way better than Dark Moon. We'll put that one aside. Let's compare it to the first game. It's interesting. The structure works. I like it because you do feel a sense of progression. You really feel satisfied as you're done with a floor, especially the floors that were really, really hard. Like Twisted Sweets was kind of hard, Boilerworks. So when you were done with those, you really felt that satisfaction when you got that elevator button and you were going to the next floor. That was really satisfying. So props to this game for that. But there's something about it that still doesn't sit right with me. It's not something that's going to make me go, oh, well, this game has a horrible structure. No. It's just something that I wanted a little more out of. I wanted a little more out of the, like, interconnectivity between the floors. Now, this is something a decent amount of people have been saying, so I know I'm not alone with this one. Basically, once you're done with a floor, the only reason you'd come back is for the gems and booze, and if Polterkitty goes on the floor. That's the only reason you'd go back to that floor. So, really, there's no interplay between the floors. There's no reason, there's no locked rooms on a different floor to where you're like, huh, I wonder, like, when I'm going to get the key to that room. And then later on, you get a key, and it'll bring you back down to that floor. You know, yeah, it's backtracking. People hate backtracking for whatever reason, even though Luigi's Mansion is a backtracking game. It's just one of those things where it's like, if there's a sense of mystery in a room you could not open when you were on a floor, like, wow, I wonder what's in this room. And then, like, an hour or two later in the game, you get a key for that room. You're like, oh, wow, I can finally see what's in this room. There's no sense of that. There's no real sense of wonder, like, in the mansion itself. Because you see all the rooms, most of them are unlocked from the get-go. There's no real sense of build-up in the floors, especially the ones that only house bosses, like the Great Stage, a Natural History Museum, Spectral Catch. There's no real grandeur to those floors. There's no real mystery to them. You see what you see. You go in, there's a big room, you go to the boss. That's really it for those floors. And it's relatively unfortunate because especially with those floors that are really, really small, it could have really used some, like, exploring elements. Like, Twisted Sweets is my favorite floor in the game because there's a lot to that floor. There's a lot of different rooms, a lot of hallways, there are some locked doors, you know, so there's a lot there, especially at the end when there was that maze kind of thing, and it all felt really mysterious. It was a mystery, it was awesome. The rest of the floors didn't have that for me. Mezzanine, for instance. Mezzanine, you literally just walked down the hallway, went into the dining hall, fought a few ghosts, and then you fought the boss of the floor. Like, there's no, granted, there was that little mouse segment afterwards, but, like, there was no real sense of you got to explore the floor. There wasn't much there. And for a mezzanine, they could have done a decent amount. They could have had a pantry room. They could have had another kind of dining room. They could have had a kids' kind of play area. They could have had a bunch of different things for a restaurant, mezzanine-themed floor. And, you know, like I said, some floors did it really, really well. I think Twisted Sweets did it pretty well. The Fitness Center did it pretty well. But even with floors like that, most of the floors were pretty linear. Here's the thing with the original Luigi's Mansion. You mostly got to explore the mansion in a random, sporadic order. Like, your rooms weren't all right next to each other and you had to go in a line. Yes, you had to work from the top of, or from the bottom of the mansion to the top of the mansion, but you hopped around a lot. Like, you hopped from the first floor to the second floor, back to the first, then up to the third, then down to the basement. There's a lot of hopping around. It wasn't that linear. But in this game, even in Twisted Sweets, you basically just had to go in a giant circle. In Fitness Center, you had to go in a giant circle. It all felt very linear, like there wasn't much to it. And the funny thing is, Scarescraper added hallways, but Luigi Mansion 3, the actual story mode, doesn't really have many hallways. Like, it has a couple, but even then, they're mostly just so that you can get from the beginning of the hallway to the end. They're not, like, explorative. I think the most explorative floor was the 15th floor, the Master Suites, because you can go into whatever room you wanted, the hallways were kind of winding. There's a lot to that floor, but most of the other floors did not have that. And I think that's where the structure starts to fall apart a little bit for me. It doesn't feel very explory. Yes, there are hidden areas, but they're done after doing these little puzzles, and they're like these small, insignificant things. The overall game isn't an explorative game. It's a linear path with minor things you can discover along the way, like a door that can open and go to a secret area. And trust me, that's great. I love being able to discover secret doors that go to secret areas. It's great. One of the best parts about Luigi Mansion 3, to be honest. Being able to discover a secret passageway that goes somewhere. I love that. But the only reward you get for it is treasure, which is worthless in this game. Like, yeah, there's a cool little store, but there's nothing there. The game basically has a built-in boo radar in the Poltergust, so you really don't need the boo radar. And the gem radar, I wouldn't spend money on the gems, because at the end of the game, there's the end, like the ranking screen, whatever. And because of how much treasure the game gives you, it really doesn't matter that much anyways, how many secret areas you find. As long as you collect all the treasure on your main adventure, you'll be fine. So, overall, structure is good. It's definitely a step better than Dark Moon. But it doesn't allow for the it's still linear, like, a little too linear for my liking, whereas just go from the beginning of the floor to the end of the floor, complete objectives, and then complete it and then move on. Especially because the floors don't feel interconnected. The elevator, to me at least, feels like a loading screen. It feels like, okay, like, once I'm done with, let's say, what floor did I never return to? Mezzanine floor, for instance. I basically never returned there. Or RIP Suites after I was done with it. You don't feel any sense to return to it. And the elevator really stamps that into confirmation. Like, oh, skipping it. And you could say, yeah, that's because there's like so many floors of the hotel, which is true. It would suck if you had to climb, especially for that mission where you went down to get the super suction shot or the super suction thing for the Spectral Catch floor. It would have sucked having to go from Spectral Catch all the way down to Basement 1 by stairs. Would have sucked. But that's where I'm like I always say this, quality over quantity. I'd rather have 6, 7, 8, whatever, beefy, quality, good floors that have a decent amount to them, rather than 17, where some of them are long, like the Boiler Works and Fitness Center, rather than and there's also the small ones, like, blank on names, Great Stage, Special Catch, Mezzanine even. So many short floors that are so insignificant. I think the first part of the game actually did it really well, where there was a lot of interconnection between the second floor, the first floor, and the basement, because they were all connected by stairs. You had to go to the second floor, get Egad, rescue him, go back down to the basement, then go back up to the first floor. So there's a lot of that kind of exploration and openness that I liked. That initial part was brilliant, where you had to go from the basement up to the second floor, down to the first, down to the basement. So there's a lot of, that kind of interconnectivity that I loved. But the game soiled that with the elevator aspect and the other linear floors that there are throughout the game. So that's all I'm going to say. I feel like a lot of people are going to hate this video because of the fact that I mostly digged into Luigi Mansion 3 and why I didn't like it. Now, let me get something out of the way. I still love the game. I still love it. I gave it an 8 out of 10, for God's sake. If you give this video a dislike because of all the bad stuff I said, and I still gave it an 8 out of 10, I had so many complaints that I just rattled off to you guys, but I still gave the game an 8 out of 10 because I looked at it from a non-biased viewpoint. So now I'm saying my biases, so you can't hate me for this one. Come on. Like, I've been very fair on the game. I have been very fair. But now that I've had the game for a while, and I'm noticing the things I don't like about it, now I'm saying it. So, there you go. So, overall, I think Luigi's Mansion 3 is a very good game, like I said, but there's just a lot of things that just don't match up to the original game for me. Atmosphere, the linearity, there's just comic variety. There's so much stuff that just doesn't live up to it. You know, and not just doesn't live up to it, but just doesn't add on to what that game had, and it could have been so much better, but it just wasn't. So, that's my viewpoint on Luigi's Mansion 3. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed, and until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.